This is a fine day, friend. Power flows through our town like a cool stream of water. I trust Adelaide's people have seen their way to reason. So, when can I expect them back at their posts? Then we are at an impasse. Stewardship over this town has been entrusted to me by Spacer's Choice. I am not perfect. I have made my share of mistakes, but I have done my best for this town. I have been holding this town together with both hands. You can't just expect me to leave. I am a Spacer's Choice man. My father was a Spacer's Choice man. Edgewater may not look like much to some buttoned-up freelancer, but it is my home.
Are you out of your mind? You just killed him. Mr. Thompson. Reed Thompson, you know, my boss? I can't. I need to leave. I need to get away from here. I need to get away from you. You killed Mr. Thompson for talking down his nose at me? You got a real twisted sense of chivalry, you know that? Let's just move on. I couldn't forgive myself if I let you loose upon the Vale unsupervised.
Look at that. The snake's come back. You have a peculiar comfort with violence. Killing off my garden, gunning down Reed Thompson. Suppose it's time our flock made our way back to Edgewater. We must tend to what remains of the town and carry on with our lives as best we may. You're vexing to me, you know? Injuring us with one hand, helping us with the other. Here, I'm giving you something to leave us be. It's a ransom, you understand, not a reward. You telling me you did all this just to put me in charge of Edgewater? Stranger, you are some kind of twisted. I might turn that old cannery into a garden. Got ourselves a whole cemetery bursting with bodies. I need some time to gather my personals. Long walk back to Edgewater. Got a considerable burden to carry.
I would have just broken it.
When I was little, we'd get freighters in every Sunday moon. Now they only come but once a month.
Everyone all right? Please, would you kindly inform the crew that long chats with Ada are not required every time the captain leaves the ship? We are now in orbit above Stellar Bay, Captain. No blockade is a match for my piloting skills.
Hey, hold on there. I gotta sign you in. Don't think I've seen you around. That means you must be new to Stellar Bay. You are new here, right? You must have seen those UDL gunships on your way in. There's only 3 of them these days. Still, they tend to scare folk off. Wish more folk could say that. Gets awful quiet guarding a landing pad that never gets used. You may not have heard, you being new, but Stellar Bay hardly ever gets off-road traffic, us being cut off by the board and all. Which means I never get to do this part, but I've been practicing, so here goes. On behalf of Monarch Stellar Industries, welcome to Stellar Bay, home of the freshest sal tuna and halcyon. Please state your name for the records. Swell. There's one for the logs. I'm even gonna give you your own entry code. I'm not supposed to do that. It's against procedure, but Mr. Sanjar isn't so strict about the rules here. Besides, I got a lot of empty entries to fill. Oh, that'll just make Mr. Sanjar's day if you tell him. The board makes up lots of nasty stories about raptidons and cannibals and whatnot. But that's all outside our walls. Mostly. Mr. Sanjar will be mighty pleased to meet you. If you see him over at headquarters, maybe you could tell him I did a bang-up job of welcoming you? Oh, and if you're headed that way, maybe you could do me a favor? I got this Rizzo's Rangers Tosswell poster coming in on the next sublight shipment, signed by the Black Hole himself. Only I haven't heard anything in a while. You think you could check with Celia to see if it's come in? Thanks a bunch. Celia works for Mr. Sanjar in the MSI building next to the bar. She's always there, so you can't miss her.
Could I get another advance, Mr. Nandi?
Just make sure it's properly logged.
Well,
New business turns up at last. Celia, didn't I tell you our new statistics-based advertising model would be a hit?
That you did, sir.
How can yield improvements of 26.7% not quicken the pulse? How can 32% cost savings not moisten the loins?
You've often posed these very questions.
Clear my schedule. This newcomer has a meeting with me. Celia, will you make a note of that for my self-review? Very generous.
Noted.
But not so generous I can't drive a good bargain. Now, who sent you? Rizzo's, perhaps? Or Auntie Cleo herself? Oh. I suppose that means you aren't here for the Saltuna. Now, there's no need to humor me. I'm used to this particular letdown.
Seems like you're having a rough time, Mr. Sanjar. Are you doing quite all right?
Oh, don't worry on my account. This is merely the latest in a long line of professional, erotic, and athletic disappointments. I had hoped that livening up our advertisements with enticing figures would draw the other corporations back to our bosom, but it seems we're back to the drawing board. What can I do for you?
With the whole board, as a matter of fact.
Thanks to the so-called hazard clause, Monarch has been cut off from the board's resources and protection for 10 years now.
So-called is right. We've got our hazards, but we're still here, damn it. The board took off without so much as a thought for the folks left behind.
I don't... Dang it, Captain, that's not right. Folks on Monarch shouldn't have to suffer just because the board says so.
Now, we've kept ourselves in business by trading with individual corporations, but given the off-the-books nature of those transactions, such arrangements are precarious.
I can tell your iconoclast friends have left their mark on you.
Freedom always sounds nice, doesn't it? It makes a rather pretty slogan. But if you sit down and tally up the costs, how you provide for yourself in the absence of aid, how you protect yourself from a hostile galaxy, it starts to lose its shine.
Indeed. Mr. Nandi here has a rather ingenious plan to get MSI restored to the board.
On our terms, mind you.
But will that help the people here, Mr. Sanjar? Keep them fed and safe?
That's precisely what I'm trying to do.
And if our advertising scheme hasn't borne fruit, then perhaps it's time we took matters into our own hands.
It's true, our Celia is an alarmingly competent middle manager. At any other company, she'd be wasted in data entry. The plan she refers to is a two-pronged approach, and the first part involves seeing Stellar Bay properly defended.
And a Mantisaur problem, and a Marauder problem.
Many problems, but they can all be solved with a Bolt 52 cartridge. If you can get us what we need to rejoin the board, starting with the Bolt 52, we won't need to advertise anymore. We can stop our transmissions altogether.
And you'll have a powerful ally on the board.
Why, one of the strongest defenses in Halcyon. An extremely powerful ordnance. In the old arms building southwest of town, which used to be part of Stellar Bay before we had to move our walls in, these days it's overrun with marauders and raptidons. Do be careful. I've lost more than a few people to marauders and raptidons out there. Oh, and while you're at it, there should be a terminal in the arms building with some dangerous information. Perhaps you could delete it so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Well, I see you've had a sobering effect on our friend Nyoka.
Sir, please stop.
Forgive me, Celia. I couldn't help myself. Anyway, what can I do for you? You're just as rigid as the old executive committee. Why, we've hardly been able to get a clear message out until recently.
When Graham finally shut up.
It isn't easy keeping a town like Stellar Bay afloat, especially without the board's backing. We need that frequency to reach our trading partners. Indeed. That's why it's imperative that MSI be reinstated onto the board. And the first step is getting the Bolt 52. Then it's good that I keep such meticulous notes. I've asked myself the same thing many times, especially seeing as the legal mechanisms we employed were part of the board's own bylaws. It's true, the board has treated us unfairly, but I'd always envisioned that things could be different. For many years, this planet was home to as many corporations as Terra 2. Back then, it was known as Terra 1. As you may have noticed, this planet has more than its share of hazards.
That ain't fair. They didn't leave on account of the hazards. They left on account of their cowardice. The hazards just gave them a reason to put to paper.
Sharp as ever, Nyoka. And as the other corporations began to tally their losses, they decided to pull out. That's also what I thought. Oh, we were young and bold then, not unlike yourself. We saw the chance to improve working hours and conditions, to reform MSI from the ground up. Nonsense! They're good business sense. Exhausted, sick, and malnourished workers are not productive workers. Even a cursory review of the data bears that out.
I hope you'd treat them nice, whether it was good business or not, Mr. Sanjar. That's what being a community means. Treating people right, because it's the right thing to do.
Here, here. That may not be the way the colony works, but it damn well oughta.
A noble thought, Miss Holcomb. Unfortunately, noble thoughts rarely sway board policy. Anyway, we learned of a loophole in the corporate bylaws that would allow MSI to claim ownership of the entire planet once the other corporations pulled out, creating the perfect environment for us to enact these new reforms. That's what I thought. But the senior executives laughed in our faces and insisted we'd be relocating to Terra 2 along with everyone else. In a manner of speaking, many of us stayed behind, in an act of quiet but firm defiance. As the most senior executive remaining, I ended up in charge of what was left of MSI. I moved forward with our planned reforms, as well as our strategy to assume ownership of the planet. Yet not long after I renamed it Monarch, the other corporations dislodged us from the board and began an official campaign to paint us as lawless savages. I don't think I realized how far they'd stoop. Everything we did was legal and above board. We followed their rules, and yet they still found reasons to declare us outlaws. I do think there's something useful in a governing body like the board. Something that keeps us from anarchy, but I dearly wish it functioned differently. What can I do for you? I see. And was his delivery of the MSI authorized greeting up to snuff? Well, that's excellent. I'll see that your feedback makes it into his review. What else can I do for you? Be careful with your new friends in Amber Heights. They're not the... Then it's good that I keep such... As I... He and his fault, but you are... I'm glad you see it too. It isn't just that they drain our people and resources. Every radical act they commit cements Halcyon's image of us all as destructive rebels and pushes us further from the rest of the colony. He's lucky the board doesn't take him seriously enough to keep more than a few UDL gunships patrolling Monarch.
An Earth Directorate assault cruiser would change his tune. It's almost a shame we haven't seen